Thanks for choosing this free Anfield Index podcast. If you'd prefer to listen to this or any of our other shows without adverts, then now's the time to check out Anfield Index Pro. With AI Pro, you can supercharge your entire listening experience. You'll not only get all of our podcasts without the ads, but you'll have them far faster with our Quick Publish feature available exclusively for subscribers. AI Pro also puts you in the heart of our sound studio, with an option to listen to many of our shows live and interact with the podcasters in real time as the shows are recording. Upgrading couldn't be easier. AI Pro is available on all popular podcast platforms, and we have our own apps for Apple and Android. Just head on over to AnfieldIndexPro.com and get started today.
Hello and welcome to your World Cup Daily. I'm Dave Hendrick, recording at 11:30 at night with Mr. Karl Matchett, because Karl Matchett, what the fuck did we just witness today?
It feels too late in the tournament to say this, but was this the day the World Cup arrived?
I think it may have been.
Oh my God.
This was proper World Cup football.
Oh, total madness. It was stressful, and it was roundabout, and it was back and forth, and it was done, and then it wasn't done, and it was tension, and it was tempers boiling over everywhere, and there were tears and tantrums, and honestly, should have been more red cards than there were goals overall.
Yeah, so let's get stuck into the first game. Croatia won, Brazil won. Croatia go through 4-2 on penalties. 0-0 at half-time. A strange game in which Croatia had outplayed Brazil in the first half. The second half was fairly even, but Brazil looked like the team that would score. Croatia didn't look like scoring. Neymar, who'd stanked the place out, scores just on the verge of half-time in extra time to give Brazil the 1-0 lead. And in the second half, Karl, it felt like Brazil just thought it was over. Petkovic scores for Croatia on 117 minutes. We go to penalties. Vlasic scores, Rodrigo misses, Meyer scores, Casemiro scores, Modric scores, Pedro scores, Orsic scores, and then Marquinhos hits the post. And Brazil are out. And you have to say, you can't really feel too much sorrow for them, because it felt like when they went one up, arrogance took hold and they just assumed it was over.
Yeah, I mean, look, Croatia had one shot on target all game long, and that was a massively deflected one. And you talk about Neymar stinking the place out. He was abysmal all of the game except for that little bit where he scored, which was unbelievably good. Well, at the other end of the pitch, Bruno Petkovic, my God, I've played better than him just asleep or five-a-side or when I broke my leg or whatever. He was abysmal. He did not do a thing all game except score to take his team to penalties in the World Cup, which is quite the thing, if we're being honest.
Look, he did create that one good chance for Brozovic.
Nutmeg.
How did that happen?
I'm not convinced he meant that at all. I think he was trying to chop back inside, and then it sort of.
I think he was trying to shoot or something.
And the second bit of touch went through. I think it was Marquinhos' legs. I mean, oh God, look, Brazil should have won. Brazil had the chances, and Brazil had the openings without being splendid all game long. I thought Lucas Paquetá was absolutely superb for most of the match. I thought Anthony, when he came on, probably had one of the best impacts I've seen from him. There were a few players scattered across the pitch who were like really good to quite good. And then it was only like in spells, but like they had enough of them. Like Vinny had one chance, left corner. There was one from Gvardiol towards his own goal. There was a one-on-one for Neymar, another one I think for Richarlison after that. And Livakovic was brilliant, like stood up absolutely everything and reacted really well. Gvardiol was just sensational again. Yeah. Maybe a couple of moments where things got away from him, but he always, apart from the Livakovic save, always recovered his own sort of misjudgment or misplaced pass or anything like that. Really, really good. Croatia were controlled and had nothing at the end of it, whereas Brazil didn't really have that much control, but still created a bit of chaos and a few openings. It was a bizarre game, but I have no sympathy for Brazil because they didn't do enough to make sure that they won. And I agree. I don't know if it is arrogance as such, but just an expectation that Croatia would just keep trying to huff and puff and not really do anything. I think the start from Pasalic was absolutely the right call. He had really good energy, really good movement in the channels, 2 really good low deliveries, which could have caused problems. And then later on, Orsic came on, who we'd spoken about as well. And I thought he was like the most lively attacker Croatia have had throughout the whole tournament so far.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, he hasn't played a lot of action. He only played like 7 or 8 minutes or something in this game as well. So lots of energy. But still, like making things happen, making the right call of when to pass and when to take people on and everything. He was very, very lively. So I can't fault Croatia for their approach because it's got them through to another semi-final. But I'm still left thinking they're not that good. Like, they're really well organised and they work extremely hard and they're set up to let that midfield dictate play. But the dictating play tends to not go anywhere in particular too much of the time for me to think that they are a good team all round. But it's the same thing as always. Like, even we spoke about it before the tournament, Nations League, qualifiers, everything. They've had this trouble of not really scoring goals, but sharing all the goals around. And that's kind of what they've done throughout the tournament again. So it works for them. You can't really have too many complaints. Juranovic at right back, I thought, was another really good performer for them. Brazil, like I said, no sympathy. I wanted them to go through. I wanted this Brazil Argentina semi-final, but they've not done enough at the end of the day. So off you go.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think Juranovic was incredible, especially for the first 70 minutes.
Yeah.
First half in particular, he was just a driving force. Lovren, to his credit, did well, but it is notable that most of Brazil's chances came in his zone. Like, they got inside him quite a few times. I thought Kovacic was absolutely monstrous in midfield. Modric was very good. Brozovic was good. But like you say, there's nothing at the end of it all. And I wonder if Orsic might get himself a start in the semi-final, because when he came on, he looked like he had a bit more purpose. So Croatia through 6 World Cups, 3 group stage exits, and 3 semi-finals. There are no half measures with this nation at all. In news after the game, Brazil's manager has resigned, Karl. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think it's a little bit reactionary, but obviously if he was going into the tournament already knowing that he was making his mind up to go, or, whether they won it or didn't win it, then, it's fair enough. That's not something taken in the heat of the moment. I hope that's the case. But he's had a fairly decent reign in terms of Seleção's history, but has ultimately fallen short. Didn't win the Copa, didn't win the World Cup. That was obviously the 2 big things that they would have wanted. They won the Olympics last year, but I mean, it doesn't really register on the.
He won the Cup in 2019, didn't he?
Oh yeah, sorry, the 2019 one. Yeah, it was the 2021, the most recent one as well.
That he lost, yeah.
So I mean, is it enough? It's probably not what he would have hoped for across that span of time anyway. I don't think that it's a terrible loss, but I do think that he'd done enough good work team building wise and having a very settled side there. But obviously, we'll be thinking now that it's not enough to make it worthwhile to stay on. So fair enough.
Yeah, I think if you're the manager of Brazil and you don't win the World Cup, because of the nature of Brazil, if you have 2 bites at it and you don't win, you're going to be considered a failure regardless of anything else. This guy won 74% of his games. He won that Copa in 2019. But because Brazil demand the World Cup, he is going to be looked at as a failure. However, he will easily walk into a good club job in Brazil tomorrow if he wants. So that there's no problem there. Just on the topic of new managers, want to get your opinion on Luis de la Fuente being appointed the new Spain manager. He's worked in the Spanish underage groups to some success, has no real track record as a club manager. Is this a good appointment, or is this a Gareth Southgate type cheap appointment?
I don't really know, to be honest, because I'm not too close in terms of what he's done previously, and obviously in the youth sides, it's not something that I will keep a very, very close eye on. So it's really one that after the World Cup, I will take a bit of a closer look at and look into how he's been doing there. But it's a succession appointment, isn't it? It's something that's within the Spanish Spanish FA setup, that'll just have a a plan to continue playing similar sort of ways, you would imagine, and try to bring through a few more of the younger players, for example. And they certainly needed them in a couple of areas at, let's say, a centre back, centre forward. Those are the key ones we'd look at probably. So it's probably something they've had in mind for a while.
Yeah, I think so. He did take charge of the Olympic team in 2020, silver medal there. He won the under-21 European Championships in 2019 and the under-19 Championships in 2015. So it does look like he has been lined up for this. In my haste to find out more about him earlier on, I looked him up. Didn't really check what I was looking at, and then got very confused to see that he died in 1972, but that was a different Luis de la Fuente.
Right.
So moving on then to the second game of today. This was real World Cup football. This had everything. This had madness. This had aggression. It had needle. It had things boiling over. It had a terrible referee. It had all the drama you could possibly ask for, and it had penalties. Argentina 2, Netherlands 2, Argentina through 4-3 on penalties. Molina scores on 35 after a genius assist from Messi. Messi makes it 2 on 73 from the penalty spot after Acuna is brought down by Dumfries, and you have to think that's it, that's game over. Wout Weghorst comes on, and in a shock to everybody, wins an aerial duel against Lisandro Martinez, who he is about 10 inches taller than, gets one back on 83. I'm begging the referee for at least 10 minutes of stoppage time. He gives us 10 minutes of stoppage time. It takes 11 minutes of stoppage time, but a brilliantly worked free kick. Theon Koopmeiner's really quick thinking, takes it short into Weghorst, one touch out of the feet, puts it past Martinez. Into extra time we go. Things got a little bit feisty in extra time, as they had been during normal time. We go to penalties after, I think the Dutch sort of settled for penalties, but we can discuss it. Into penalties, Van Dijk steps up first. You love to see your captain and best player stepping up. It's a good penalty. It's a great save by Emi Martinez. Messi scores. Steven Berghuis steps up. Again, I think it's a good penalty. It's an incredible save. Paredes scores. Koopmeiner scores. Montiel scores. Wout Weghorst scores. Enzo Fernandez steps forward with the chance to win the game for Argentina. Does the same stupid penalty that Marcus Rashford did in the Euros. Sends it wide. Luke de Jong steps up and scores. And then a player who has had a dreadful tournament to date, Lautaro Martinez, steps forward, big pressure, big balls time, and rattles it into the back of the net, and Argentina go through. Cue pandemonium, cue more needle, cue furious Dutch players. Denzel Dumfries gets booked, Noah Lang gets booked, and then Denzel Dumfries manages to get booked again and is sent off. Karl, this was absolutely brilliant.
It was absolute mayhem. It was ridiculous. I'm going to start with stupidity and rubbishness, right? Mateo Lahoz, I've spoken about him so many times, I'm sick of it. I think he's an absolute idiot. I cannot stand him. I know there's loads of people who like the fact he brings a bit of, I don't know what they call it, flair or whatever. To me, it is pig-headed, obstinate stupidity. He has no control of matches. He is outrageously arrogant with how he speaks to the players and reacts to the players. He never has any control when situations start getting out of hand, because he's the one who's inciting so much of it in the first place with his approach. I think he's an idiot. Really, really do. The number of yellow cards in this game, the red card, I mean, yeah, okay, there was definitely needle. There was definitely people going at it, and there could have been another couple of red cards for individual actions, I would say. But the amount of yellow cards shown here, and to people on the bench and to people, the staff and all the rest of it, this is him letting the game get out of hand. And that's a big part of the reason why what happened, because again, it's him who's added on the 10 minutes. Absolute nonsense. There was never 10 minutes stoppage time in that game. Maybe if this was like in the first round of group stage games, you could say 10 minutes fine, but not as the World Cup has been in the round of 16s and the quarterfinals. Absolutely no chance.
But he was telling the Argentine players, I'm stopping the clock here. If you're going to time waste, I am stopping the clock. So
fine,
I think that's fair.
No, it's still not in proportion to how the rest of the quarters have been played out. Even in the Croatia's players towards the end, once they've got the equaliser, and at the end of 90 minutes, they were doing the same thing. And in a couple of the games in the round of 16, it was the same thing again. And that amount of time was not getting put on in those matches. But let's leave that aside. Even if that was absolutely fine, let's say the stoppage time is the most minor thing, he still has no control of those matches.
No.
Let alone, that's just in a normal occasion when he makes things worse than they are, let alone in a game which has the historical weight and the actual context of what happened in the game as this one.
I think he was awful. I really do. Let's focus on one moment. Leandro Paredes throws in probably the worst tackle we've seen in the competition so far. That alone was a yellow card. Then he fires the ball at the Dutch bench. That's a yellow card.
That could be a red by itself.
That should be a red. It should be 2 yellows, or the tackle itself could have been a red. Virgil van Dijk steams in and bodies him to the floor and doesn't even get booked. He body slams the fella onto the floor. Then the entire Dutch bench invades the pitch. The game is going on. The Dutch are on the pitch, and he's completely lost. He doesn't have any control. And it's the players themselves that managed to sort it out. There was another moment where there was a bit of a kerfuffle in the penalty area between, was it Emi Martinez and Luke de Jong, where Martinez came out for a cross and sort of bumped into de Jong.
Yeah.
And he just stood to one side, relentlessly blowing his whistle, rather than actually doing anything to stop the players coming together. This is great, though, Karl. This reminded me of the 98 meeting between these sides that had loads of needle and bitterness and horribleness, and it's all a holdover from the 1978 World Cup final. It reminded me, without the spitting, of Netherlands versus Germany in 1990. This is what I want to see. This is proper World Cup. Hatred between nations. Yeah. I want war declared.
I don't think you were that far away from getting it tonight, to be fair. Look, this is what World Cup is, right? This is what it means so much to these players, to the fans. Like, it was such a home game for Argentina. And I want to touch on Argentina as a team in a minute as well, aside from all this warmongering that we're doing at the minute. The occasion itself and the opportunity to get to a World Cup semi-final, and I am absolutely convinced the fact that Brazil went out earlier added to that as well. It suddenly opened up what looks like on that side of the draw a real route to the final suddenly. Like Croatia, finalists last time, fine, but nobody still really sees them as like finalists capable sort of thing. So either of these two teams went into this knowing, oh my God, we've got a real chance getting to the World Cup final here. We've got to get through this at whatever cost. Then you add in a bit of notoriety, the fixture, and what happened in the game, and the referee being an absolute shambles and all the rest of it. This was always likely to be blood and thunder from the get-go, but the more it went on, the more things happened, the more things were allowed to happen, to be honest. It just developed and developed, and it was a proper brawl at times, let's be honest. And yet, it was far better quality football, I thought, than the first game.
Oh, yeah. Oh, there was a real football match broke out at times in this one.
Yeah, there was in between stopping.
In between the fighting.
Yeah. But look, just to touch on quickly, like Argentina, I thought they started a bit stilted, let's say, in possession, and they took a little while to get used to the formation, which was a switch to the 3-5-2. If people didn't see that, we spoke about prior to the game that they tested it at the end of the Australia match, which looked okay, but when they conceded that free goal to Australia, again, as we mentioned, the point, they just lost everything, like completely lost their heads. It went from
composure, a
tactical passing, winding down time match to utter emotion and no control. And that's exactly what happened again here. They had 7 minutes to hold out plus injury time and a 2-goal lead.
Yeah.
And exactly the same. As soon as one went in, absolute meltdown. Like nothing happened other than yellow cards and giving away free kicks for the last, what was in the end, like 12 minutes of that match. And it speaks volumes to A, obviously how much it means to Argentina, but B, that they still lack this just complete cold-blooded ability to see out a game, which I think still some of the very, very top sides, even at international level, if not at club level, still have that. Like some of them would have just like killed stone dead that last, injury time, let's say, which was 10 minutes and a little bit more in the end. It just seemed very, very inevitable Netherlands would get another goal. I will say that Tim Koopmeiners, my God, I thought he was going to plant that top corner. And then just for the little pass into Weghorst's feet, of all things,
Brilliant.
Absolutely superb.
What I don't understand, Karl, is why in extra time the Dutch didn't just go pure agricultural football. Yeah, they had seven lads on the pitch, 6'2" or taller, including the goalkeeper. Argentina had 2. Argentina had 3 lads 5'8" and shorter.
Yeah.
The Dutch had an enormous physical advantage in extra time. And I don't understand why they didn't just go entirely route one. Number one, you're keeping the ball at the other end of the pitch. And number 2, Martinez is tiny and can't jump. Otamendi is old and can't really jump. And who was the centre back to come on? Pizzala, he's old and not exactly mobile. I don't understand why, when you've got Weghorst and you've got, I tweeted at the time, and it bit me a little bit, but I said, if you're throwing on Luke de Jong and Wout Weghorst in search of goals, it does show how weak the Dutch squad is. But the one advantage they had was they're massive. They're enormous. Why not go route one, even for the last 5 or 6 minutes? Throw Virgil up front. Timber and Aki are more than quick enough to hold it together at the back. Sit Frankie in front of them and pour everyone else into the box.
The person I was watching the game with sort of asked the question, when they scored the 2 goals, why didn't they just start with those guys? Why don't you sort of take that approach from the first? And that's fair to not, I think, because it would have left them obviously very exposed. It wouldn't have had them as settled in possession for the chances that they did to get a bit of time on the ball and so on. But late in the game, once you've already made those changes, absolutely. Why get yourself back into the match and then sit off again all of a sudden and let Argentina? But by contrast, you can still ask the same of Argentina. Why do you let yourselves be so emotionally affected by conceding a goal when you're still winning? You know now that you've conceded the second one, and straight away you're back on the front foot. Straight away you're able to have these combinations of passes and play through the first 2 lines and get chances. Why don't you do that 2-1? Kill the game. You're able to. You're by far the better technical side at that point after those changes have been made. And even then, there's still another 2, maybe 3 very, very near misses for Argentina to win it. Enzo hit the post.
Yeah.
I think sent one just over the bar. And was there a Lautaro shot that was deflected?
It hit Virgil. It hit Virgil right in the chest.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Off Virgil's chest. That's right. It was, honestly, this game was insanity. It was the most ridiculous one of the World Cup, even factoring in those weird permutations in the group stage very, very late on.
There's 2 things with the Dutch here before we move on. First and foremost, at the end of the regulation time, when the final whistle went after the 90-plus stoppage time, Argentina have to have felt like they just lost. They'd been 2 up, and they just conceded in the 111th minute an equaliser. That had to be a hammer blow. So starting extra time, the Dutch should have been going hell for leather at them, pummeling them. But instead, they allowed Argentina to kind of catch their breath and compose themselves and get themselves back into the right frame of mind. The big downside of what the Netherlands did with their substitutions, bringing on the likes of de Jong and Weghorst, is when it got to penalties, you really did have to feel like Argentina had a big advantage because they had far more technically gifted players that you would trust from 12 yards out than the Dutch did.
Yeah, I think so. That's fair. Even if they're not the most technical, I think there are still enough players who can hit the ball in the Dutch side, basically, to step up and take penalties and be reasonably confident about the outcome. But shootouts.
I thought Berghuis, Koopmeiners, and de Jong all looked really nervous stepping up. Now, Koopmeiners and de Jong both scored good penalties, but I thought they looked nervous. Whereas the Argies, they look like this is normal. This is what we wanted. We're happy to be here.
I would have put my house on Lautaro Martinez missing that penalty, I have to say. So fair play to him.
Yeah, big balls after bad tournaments so far. Let's move on to...
Just before we do, I want to address one thing, and
Yes.
that's like this photo that's been going around on social media straight after the match, which is like in the instant Lautaro Martinez has scored the wing penalty. It's half the Argentine team running off celebrating, and half the Argentine team running past the Netherlands players who are collapsed on the floor in agony, obviously, and celebrating in their faces, and people saying, "Oh, it's classless, and it's a horrible thing, and why is that your first impression?" and all the rest of it. I would say, obviously, there's a few players in that Argentina team, Otamendi and a couple of others, who are that way inclined anyway. But add in everything we've spoken about, the weight of history and the rivalry between the nations, and the fact that this is a World Cup quarterfinal and all the rest of it. I would also say a large part of that was going to be some responses to what was said by the Netherlands group when the 2-2 went in, because there was an equal amount of shithouses in that squad.
Yeah. Look, I loved it. Personally, I love it.
Yeah.
Because I want these type of rivalries in international football. We don't have them anymore. Obviously, Argentina, Brazil, the Dutch against the Germans, those kind of things can get a little bit heated. But I want to see more of this. I want to see real rivalries at the World Cup. It's what it's about. It's what it's about. And these teams only play each other at World Cups in big games aside from crappy friendlies. So this is what I want to see. That's brilliant. The next time those two teams play, there's going to be a big build-up and the game will seem important, even if it's a crappy friendly. Let's move on then. Today, which people listening on Saturday, today's games will be Morocco versus Portugal. Morocco, obviously, surprise toppers of a group, came through the round of 16 by beating Spain on penalties. Portugal, having dropped Cristiano Ronaldo last time out, demolished Switzerland 6-1. They also had topped their group. This stands to be an interesting game, Karl, and I think a lot hinges on the bravery of the Portuguese manager. Does he have it to leave Cristiano out again?
Yeah, I mean, we might as well start there. Do you think he will be? Because that is the biggest thing.
I think he has to. Like, how do you drop a player who's just scored a hat-trick? Because he can't play anywhere else. It's not like Cristiano can play on the wing.
No, I don't think that's the question. I think it is. I mean, you can't drop Ramos, like you've just said. I think it would be a case of accommodating Ronaldo even more, like putting Fernandes behind Ramos and Ronaldo, something like that, and dropping João Felix, something like that. It would be an absolute accommodation if he comes back into the team.
Do you know what the thing is, right? He can't really win either way unless they go on and win the competition with Cristiano sitting on the bench.
Yeah.
Because if he plays them and they lose, he'll get criticised. If he doesn't start him and they lose, the weird people who don't actually understand football will obliterate him. And this what World Cup football does is it draws in a lot of the casuals. So people that don't watch football a whole lot, but it's national pride, so they get themselves invested. And the one player that all the Portuguese non-football fans who will invest themselves in a World Cup will know is Cristiano. And if he plays them and they lose, he's going to get criticised by the people who know what they're talking about, because everybody knows he's not good enough to play as a starter anymore, because he doesn't offer anything off the ball. He doesn't play for the team. He plays for himself. So if you start him, you're basically starting a team of 10 and one fella who's just going to do his own thing and not contribute. And against a team like Morocco, who are going to fight and scratch and claw and bite for every single ball, I don't know that you can afford to be down one man's work rate.
No, you absolutely can. You also can't afford to, I don't think, take out someone who really should be flying on confidence right now, whichever one of that front three that they take out, João Felix, Ramos or Fernandes, really. You can't take any of them out and put in someone who is going to be, above all else, determined to show that he should be in the team for himself reasons, not for the team reasons. So I don't think that there is any kind of a win for Fernando Santos to put him back in. He's made the biggest decision, which is to do it for the first time. That's the thing, really. Once you've done it the first time, I think it becomes not necessarily easy, but certainly a lot more sort of power in your corner, let's say, to say, look, I'm doing it at the times which is right. We'll see about the next game. We'll see about the next game. We'll see about the next game. But this one, I think this is right, and it was last time. So you've got to back me. You've got to trust me again. So I think he will start on the subs bench, and it'll be the same front three.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's what he will do. I hope that's what he will do. It's definitely the right call. For Morocco, the big question, Karl, is fitness. Is Agard fit? Is Saiss fit? Is Boufal fit?
So it looks like maybe Naif Agard is not going to be, because that's a groin injury, which...
That's a huge blow.
Yeah, that would be massive for them.
He has been monstrous in this tournament.
Yeah, I think it's between him, Lucas Paquetá having such a big impact for Brazil at centre mid, and maybe one or two other players. I think West Ham might be suddenly having visions of what could happen in 2023, but he's not played too much for them yet this season, and looks like he might be a little bit sidelined now. Hopefully it's media misdirection, let's say, and he is okay, because he's a huge part, and that partnership has been just unbelievably good. Saiss and Agard together.
Best in the tournament for me.
As a partnership,
best in the tournament thus far.
Agree. Yeah, I'd agree.
And I think the back four as a whole has been the best in the tournament. And because people loved them so much the last time, I've done my combined 11s. I'm going to run it by you here. I'm not a big fan of Bono, so I've gone for Costa as the goalkeeper. Right. I've gone Hakimi right back, Mazraoui left back, because I'm not having João Cancelo. And Guerrero's only had one good game in the tournament. I'm going Diaz and Agard as the centre-backs. Obviously, this is pre-Agard getting hurt. In midfield, I'm going Bruno, Amrabat, and Bernardo Silva. I think that's nicely balanced. And then I've got João Felix, Goncalo Ramos, and Sofiane Boufal as my front three. 6-5 to Portugal. But what I will say is the areas in which I've picked the Moroccan players, I think Portugal are much stronger than the areas in which I've picked the Portuguese players for the Moroccans. Like, I think Morocco's eights have done really well with their work, but I don't think they're anywhere close to the level of Bruno and Bernardo. I don't think En-Nesyri he's a good player, and I do like him, but he doesn't have Ramos's killer instinct in front of goal. Whereas, you look at Hakimi and Mazraoui, I think the Portuguese fullbacks are quite good. Pepe is, despite being 400, still quite good at centre-back.
I mean, I think Pepe's had a better tournament than Diaz, to be honest.
He has, but if you were picking one of them to go forward with, you'd have to pick Diaz, because he's 24 and Pepe's 39.
Yeah.
So I think this is a more balanced game than people think. I think a lot of people think Portugal will just run over Morocco here because they ran over Switzerland, but I think Morocco really well organised. I really like the coach. I think he's done outstanding work.
Yeah.
Given he's only in the job a wet week.
Yeah,
I think this one's going to be fascinating.
I mean, it really should be. Portugal, if they hadn't have gone through in the manner that they did against Switzerland, if they'd have gone through playing similarly to how they did in the group stage and sort of, a 2-1 just about set piece sort of win or something like that, I'd probably err towards Morocco. What makes me change my mind on that is, one, the injuries and how much work they had to put into that Spain game to get through. And two, the fact that Portugal just looked light on their feet and full of energy and full of speed and loads of rotation of positions, and completely changed the way that they attack, really, in that last game. That's what has swung it completely in my mind now. So I think so much of this for Morocco relies on them having as close to a starting 11 being full strength as possible. We've spoken about Agard. Let's leave him out for now because it looks like maybe he won't be. But if they were to lose, I would even say one more of that spine from, let's say, Hakimi, Saiss, Amrabat, and Boufal. I think that's like 30% of chance gone, because those players are so key for them.
Yeah, I do agree. And we know that Amrabat is playing with pain-killing injections in his back as well, which is a bit of a concern.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely will be. I mean, Portugal definitely have the squad depth without it dropping off quite so much, but there is, especially in a World Cup and a knockout, there's so much to be said for, the team spirit and organisation and understanding of roles and really good partnerships. And it's not just between centre-backs, which is now obviously going to be changed, but Amrabat covering for both the fullbacks going forward. It's the fullback and that sided 8 who cover for each other, and Sai's covering behind Mazraoui, for example. All of these have worked really, really well for Morocco. It's very, very clear that whatever it is that Walid Regragui has been doing, working on the out of possession, who covers for who, is a huge, huge part of that. Working on the intercombinations when they're sort of trying to move through the thirds, and who makes the run off the ball for Bafal when he's sort of coming in field and everything. All of these things are like clockwork for them. It's not like unbelievably new or fancy or anything like that. They're doing it right. They're doing it works. It is at the right times. They're doing it repetitively, and teams are struggling to cope with that. They defend so diligently and bodies on the line and everything, and Bruno hasn't made any mistakes, and that's a big thing.
No, and the small mistakes he made in the Spain game with some of his kicking, he got away with, so it didn't hamper his confidence. Prediction for this game?
I think Portugal win it if they play, obviously, in a similar way to the way that they did, but it will absolutely not be easy for them. I hope Morocco give them a really good game. I mean, Morocco have obviously made history for themselves already, getting this far and winning the amount of games that they have done. But what an opportunity! Like, no African side in a semi-final of a World Cup, and they are, the 4th, I think, nation to get to the quarters and have the opportunity to get that far. So they will put, even more than Argentina's players did, bodies on the line for this game. But I think I'll go 2-1 to Portugal.
Just because I agree, I think Portugal will win, but because I do want to see history made, I want to see an African team in the semi-finals, I'm going to go Morocco on penalties after a 1-1 draw. And I'm going to suggest that Cristiano misses his penalty. Moving on to the final quarterfinal. It is the big one. I think the one that a lot of people penciled in straight away as the one to watch. It is England, conquerors of mighty Iran, mighty Wales, and mighty Senegal, against reigning World Cup champions France. Karl Matchett, how are you feeling about this one?
Really, really intrigued. I think England going 4-3-3 is a very brave thing, but also the right thing to do for the team setup. I think it sort of speaks volumes as to the progression of the side as a group, let's say. France, I think, are still another gear to go, to be honest. If they're going to hit top form, I think there's more to come from them. Obviously, they have the greatest and most dangerous individual at this World Cup so far on their team, but it's not just about him. I think there have been some unbelievably standout performers who haven't really been spoken about, have been a bit overlooked. I think Antoine Griezmann, again, has just been nothing short of sensational for them. I just absolutely love how he plays for France. It's so central to everything that they do. I mean, we know, obviously, well, you're not, I am, in England, and we get the same sort of media coverage at the very least, even if it's not the same country. And we know that there's going to be huge focus on like 2 or 3 specific people. It's going to be Bellingham because of how he's been playing and how good he is. It's going to be Kyle Walker because he's up against Kylian Mbappe in that. Kane against Lloris, captain, Tottenham, blah, blah, blah. But I just think that there are so many really interesting sort of one-on-ones and little duels going up against each other here. Like Maguire, considering his form, considering the season he's had, I think he's done very well for the large part. But Giroud is one of those players who always seems to score against people who you would think would do well against them, like taller and stronger defenders who do well in like clearances and headers and aerials and the rest of it. Against like Van Dijk, for example, he always struggles against Giroud. He's that kind of player who can just...
Virgil said he's his toughest opponent.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest. He always seemed to get the better of him, even if it was just for a few moments in a game, and he would punish them. Adrien Rabiot, another one, I think has been just brilliant. Like aside from maybe the first game, I think he's been... Sorry?
I think he's been outstanding.
Yeah, he really has. Like I think first game, Tchouameni was brilliant, better than Rabiot, better than most people. But Rabiot since then has just been non-stop really, really good. And I think we mentioned after the Senegal match, Declan Rice probably had his weakest game in that fixture. So how those midfielders match up against each other, honestly think this is going to be such an intriguing tactical matchup as much as anything else. I mean, France, from a technical perspective and from a attacking baseline of ability, I think are marginally ahead here, but I don't think that there's a huge gap. I think it's like, even if you say 60-40 sort of thing, it's a reasonable chance that England can go into the game and do something very, very positive. There will be spells, obviously, where France dominate, but I think that the big thing for England, obviously, is how they react if they go behind, because we haven't seen that yet at the tournament, whereas France, obviously, we have right from the very first game. If England do go in front, though, I think it's not without the realms of possibility they do defend it well.
Are we certain he's going 4-3-3?
I mean, it's not obviously guaranteed, but most lines coming out of the camp, let's say, yes.
There seems to be more lines than normal coming out of the camp, is my point.
A lot earlier, yeah.
Yeah, which makes me wonder, are we going to see the patented back seven that he has previously employed?
I think it would be such a mistake that I think it's too obvious now that England are staying 4-3-3, because that midfield was better balanced, and with the three, with Saka being one of them, able to drop in as a fifth or a fourth in midfield, if you like, there's just too much balance there to wreck.
So one player that you didn't mention that I think is going to be absolutely vital tomorrow, because there's been so much focus on Mbappe. So much focus. England have a plan to stop Mbappe, which sounds to me like what they're going to try and do is overload on England's right, France's left, and stop Mbappe. And what that could well do is it could leave Luke Shaw isolated against Ousmane Dembele. And I think Ousmane Dembele has quietly had a very, very good tournament. And I don't fancy Luke Shaw's chances of stopping him 1v1.
No, I do think that will be marginally problematic. I think Dembele has been excellent in spells and a little bit hit and miss in others, to be honest. I think it's quite notable that he's one of the first off most of the time. Partly probably due to managing fitness, because obviously he's been in and out with hamstrings and all the rest of it. So maybe it's just that as well. But even if Dembele does go one-on-one and absolutely blitz Shaw, I still think that the people from the second line and second attack...
You think Slabhead Maguire is stopping Ousmane Dembele in a tight space?
I mean, he might turn around in time to see him go past. That's about it.
So you mentioned Rice. I think he's going to be key tomorrow. I don't think he's had a good World Cup. I think the game against Iran was very, very easy. I thought he was awful against America and got completely overrun. He was okay against the Welsh once England went in front, but he was a non-factor in the first half. I didn't think he played well against Senegal. So I think Declan Rice needs a big performance, and he's going to be going up against Tchouaméni, who's a monster, and Rabiot, who's in probably the best form he's been in about 5 years, which doesn't really fill me with confidence if I was supporting England. I want to do my combined 11, but I want to do it with you. So I'm going to ask you for your pick in each position. We've got them lined up 4-3-3, and we'll see how we differ. Hugo Lloris or Jordan Pickford?
Oh, God. Don't like either of these, do I?
Neither do I.
Lloris, I suppose. Are we going on World Cup form or just overall general?
We go on what we expect from them tomorrow.
All right. Pickford.
I've gone Lloris. Jules Koundé or Kyle Walker?
Koundé.
Rafa Varane or John Stones?
Varane, just about.
Dayot Upamecano or Harry Maguire?
Harry Maguire.
Oh, dear. Oh, you've got that one far, far too wrong, I'm afraid, my friend. Theo Hernandez versus Luke Shaw. Now, bear in mind, you are the chairman of the Theo Fernandez fan club, and I will report this to the other members if you go wrong on this one.
I'm not answering this one. You know what the answer is.
It's Theo Hernandez. Jude Bellingham or Antoine Griezmann?
Oh, God. Bellingham. I think Bellingham's going to be very, very important to the Dembele cover that we were just talking about.
Aurelien Tchouameni or Declan Rice?
Germany.
Adrian Rabiot or Jordan Henderson?
2-goal Jordan Henderson.
Oh dear. You can't possibly be serious with that.
No, I'm not. It's Rabiot.
It's Rabiot by miles. I do agree on the Bellingham one. I do think Bellingham right now is in slightly better form, even though I think Griezmann's playing really, really well. Ousmane Dembele or Bukayo Saka?
Saka.
I think this is the toughest one of all.
Yeah, me too. Saka.
I've leaned Dembele, but I've no argument with Saka because you know I love him. Kane or Giroud?
On the day, Giroud. I think this is a kind of game that Kane won't do loads in the box of, but will have to be very, very good for England's build-up play, which is actually why I've not picked Upamecano. I think he might struggle with Kane.
I have criticised Kane in the past in international tournaments where I feel like he's stat padded with penalties and tap-ins. He's only got 1 goal in this tournament, but I would say this has been Harry Kane's best international tournament as a player by a considerable margin.
Yeah, I think that's fair. He was pretty dismal in the Euros in the group stages until he started scoring off, obviously later on. But I think his build-up play, combination play, and all that has been not too bad at all. Even from like very early on that first game, I think a couple of the goals he set up, one of them that moved down the right hand side where he crossed for Sterling. That sort of period,
outstanding.
He was playing brilliantly at that time. So,
and I thought he was the only English player that came out of the US game with any real credit because he had to drop in and be the midfield as well as trying to be the centre forward. Kylian Mbappe or Phil Foden?
It's not really a fair question, let's be honest.
Well, Man City fans claim that Phil Foden is a generational talent, so I'm going to ask you the question.
You know what? Arsenal fans thought the same about Laurent Koscielny for about 20 years. So.
He had that one good year. That was British. So you have picked Pickford, Maguire, Bellingham, and Saka. You've picked 4 English players. I've only picked 2. I've picked Bellingham and Kane. But like I said, I think right wing is incredibly close. I think this is the game in which the starting 11, even though I think France have 9 that would start for England only 2 that would start for France, I do think in both cases it's really strong with most of the players who don't get in except for Harry Maguire, because I just think he's an absolute sack of cow manure. I want 2 predictions from you on this one.
Yeah.
I want your prediction if Southgate goes with the back 7.
Right.
And I want your prediction if they go 4-3-3 and try to go toe-to-toe with this French team. Because I do wonder if going toe-to-toe with them is a mistake, because France seem to want to sort of just sit in and launch Mbappe on counterattacks. Yeah,
they absolutely do. And I'm 100% not advocating going all out and trying to beat France at their own game or any such nonsense as this. What I want is to see from England is to keep that balance in midfield, right? Because the protection was there for the fullbacks. The link-up play was there in the channels. There was overlapping runs from the 8s. There was an intent to get people running in behind Kane on the diagonals. That's what I want to see from the 4-3-3. It's not about overcommitting and trying to be better than France in attack or anything like that. It's about having sensible positional work on and off the ball, being ready for those transitions to protect it, and being able to have spells in the game where you do have more possession. You are able to progress through the thirds up the pitch. If England play a 3-4-3, because whenever Southgate has played the back 3, it's always been 3 up front. It's never 3-5-2, and that's the important thing.
It's 7 at the back and 3 up front.
Yeah, if England play 2 in central midfield against this France side, they will have about 8 touches of the ball all game long, and it will be 2-0 to France at least. England will not be able to break out of that shape, not be able to get the wing backs high enough. The right and left side of forwards will inevitably have to drop deeper and deeper. There will just be no way out at all, and they won't get the ball. So it has to be 3 in midfield for that reason. If England had played previously 3-5-2, I wouldn't have a problem with that. But it's that shape in midfield with the 3, the channel runners, support for Kane running beyond him. That's what's really important here from a not just protecting against Mbappe perspective, but protecting against Rabiot and Griezmann in particular.
Yeah, I think Bellingham might have forced him into playing the 4-3-3 because if you play the back three as he wants to do, Bellingham can't be one of the double pivot.
No.
You can't go Rice and Bellingham. You'll get destroyed. And I think Bellingham is the one forcing his hand. I think ideally he would like to go Rice, Phillips and Bellingham because I think he really rates Calvin Phillips, and I do as well. I think he's excellent. But Phillips clearly isn't fit, so Henderson likely to start. It's a big game. It's a lot of pressure. Henderson has not been good for a couple of years on a consistent basis. So asking him to put together good performances back to back is a big ask at this point. He's going to have a lot of responsibility for helping Kyle Walker deal with that absolute alien who's playing on the left side for France. And Walker, let's not forget, is only back from surgery, has started, 2 games since the start of October. And you're going to ask him to go against Kylian Mbappe. It smells to me like a recipe for disaster.
I mean, ideally, you'd have someone in the squad who has played right back against Kylian Mbappe in like Champions League.
It's just a shame there's nobody like that around.
If only there was that possibility. But
and then maybe they could also offer you something in attack in terms of a passing ability or crossing ability, given Harry Kane is very good in the air.
You'll just have to be left to wonder what might have been if such a person existed.
Yeah, there's Newcastle fans somewhere that have heard me say crossing ability and are furiously shouting about Kieran Trippier. What's your prediction then? England go 4-3-3. How does this game play out?
I'm going extra time. I don't know if maybe just 1-1, maybe 2-2. I think there'll be a lot of back and forth in this. And I think both teams will at times look like they might run away with it, just because they have little spells where they're really on top. But if England don't fall behind, I think this goes all the way. All the way to pens.
If England score first, I think this goes to extra time at the very least. If France score first, I think France win 3-1. Because I think England will have to commit forward. And I think if you commit forward with Kylian Mbappe and Ousmane Dembele behind you, I think you're going to be in major, major trouble. So here's hoping France score first and get themselves through. Not that I'm biased or anything. Right, we've gone exceptionally long tonight. That's Karl's punishment for making us pod at 11:30. It's actually my idea, to be fair. So, Karl, this was a brilliant day of World Cup football, an absolutely brilliant day. And here's everything crossed that tomorrow is just as good, because we deserve this. The last thing I want to touch on is something you mentioned to me earlier in a WhatsApp conversation, that you were in the pub watching the Netherlands-Argentina game, and nobody seemed to care that the game was going on. Now, your colleague Miguel Delaney at The Independent, he has said a couple of times on his Twitter feed that, you know, he's out and about during the day, going into the fan zones, and there's nobody there. And he's been at a whole bunch of World Cups and Euros and whatever else, and he says this is a real first for this. And when I see people on social media, I see so many people saying I haven't watched a minute of it, or I've only watched England, or I've watched an hour, I watched one game. People don't seem to care about this World Cup. That's the overall feeling I get. And I get the same feeling from the atmosphere at a lot of the games. The Argentina-Netherlands game had a great atmosphere. But I've gotten that feeling throughout this World Cup, is that no one really cares what's going on. And that's a big shame. Yeah,
I mean, like, obviously there are going to be certain people who simply refuse, and that's absolutely fine. There's people who were doing it for many, many good reasons, let's be honest. There's absolutely the case that if that is your feeling about where it's being held and all the off-pitch stuff which has happened in the build-up to it has turned you off the idea completely, I think that's fine. I really do. It's a shame that obviously some of the players and some of the teams which have been put together have had the opportunity to to play in front of these people taken away from them, basically. I can't speak for all of the country and all of the areas, because as I said to you in the message, that this was actually the first game, the Netherlands-Argentina one, the first one that I've actually been able to watch out in a sort of social setting, social environment. But what I can say is, like, compared to the Euros, compared to the 2018 World Cup as well, leaving work, late at night, late in the evening, sometimes you'd be coming out after the England games, after other games, into the streets, and people would be leaving the pub, leaving the friend's house or wherever they've been watching, and streets would be filled with people like singing and shouting and playing things on their phones, and all the Southgate songs that came out in the 2018 World Cup. There hasn't been any of that this time, none whatsoever, none at all. I don't know if that is all to do with the fact of where this World Cup is and the people have obviously not got so much. I suspect there's also an element of, at least from an England perspective, the fact that all the way through this, it's been painfully evident all the way, basically, that England and France are going to be meeting in the quarterfinals. A quarterfinal is not quite big enough to get that excited about if you think you're going to get walloped. Whereas I think maybe if England do go through this, maybe you suddenly see a big uptick in interest and watching and all that for the semi-finals kind of thing. It might be that. It used to be very, very much the same in Spain when I lived there, to be honest. A lot of times in the group stages, people wouldn't even know that Spain were playing that day. But suddenly when it got to the quarterfinals and they got past that quarterfinal for the first time in ages, all of a sudden everybody wanted to know about it. But either way, it's absolutely the case that it's not as full on in sort of social environments that I have been able to see in terms of Miguel and the rest of them who are over in Qatar at the minute. Basically, the feedback is kind of that it's more like being at an Olympic environment and tournament rather than a football one, really, because it's like a very, very centralized media hub that you go to, first of all, and everything is sort of taken care of there in terms of what your day is going to be, which stadiums you're going to, because it's all travelable from that one spot. And then you sort of pitch out from there to the stadiums you're going to for the games that you're going to, and everything is almost within a village. So it's very, very similar to the Olympics in that regard. And therefore, the atmosphere is obviously very different as well. In the stadium of the Olympics, maybe you're going to get good atmosphere and people for certain events are doing being very, very interested in it. But on a minute-to-minute basis, I don't really know anybody who walks around talking about the build-up to the 100 meters semi-final second heat or something like that. It's not really the thing. So I feel like it's been a bit the same, at least for the European teams, less so for the Africans and South Americans, where the support does seem to have been largely excellent throughout.
That's a really good shout, actually, that if you consider Qatar as more city than country in terms of as a host, and everything is in one area because the country is so small and everything's so easily traveled. And then when you consider that, when a World Cup is traditionally on, it's in Brazil, they're flamboyant people. It's in South Africa, flamboyant people. Italy, France, these are flamboyant, football-mad people. The Qataris by nature are quite reserved, very humble, very respectful. So they're not going to be out screaming and shouting and dancing in the streets. There's also obviously the factor of the alcohol bans and whatever else are keeping people largely in hotels because they can drink there and they can't drink in certain other areas. And then the other big part of the population is made up by, immigrants who've come there either for work or because they've got loads of money and they largely don't give a shit about football. So, there is a few interesting factors. One thing I learned today is that they're actually dyeing the pitches. They're dyeing them green to make them look more lush, which I wasn't aware of. But Christ, I find that funny for whatever reason. But we will leave that there. What have you got coming out for the good people to read?
Oh God, just go watch all the goals again. I think that'll be more fun this time.
I'm going to watch Argentina versus the Netherlands again tomorrow in its entirety and try to figure out what went on. And I'm going to rewatch the Virgil Paredes thing 50 times before I go to bed tonight, because that's the greatest moment in World Cup history as far as I'm concerned. The fact that he didn't get booked is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, that was almost a red card itself. And like I said, there was at least 3 other potential red card moments, starting with that Paredes nonsense anyway. Anyway, go watch the goals. Lisa Marie says hi to you and Guy in the background as well. That's it from me.
Cool. Well, I have dragged this to almost an hour, much to Mr. Matchett's annoyance, and it had to. It deserved it. Today was a proper World Cup day. We saw one of the favourites getting eliminated on penalties by a country with less than 4 million people who just continually overperform at these major events. We saw one of the greats in Luka Modric extend his international career by one more game and he'll try and it'll be by 2 more games because they'll get the 3rd and 4th place playoff now regardless. We saw Leo Messi, I thought, put on largely a masterclass for 75 minutes before Argentina started to really shake on their stilts, and we saw chaos take over for the last 20 minutes of that game. Extra time was really tense. It was kind of horrible to get through. The penalties, Emi Martinez, my hat is off, son. 2 unbelievably good penalty saves, not like some of the missed penalties we've seen in this competition. They were well hit penalties, and you made 2 great saves. From a Liverpool point of view, I'm selfishly happy that Virgil comes home now and gets some lovely rest, as do Alisson and Fabinho. I think that's, from a Liverpool point of view, that's a good thing. Hopefully Henderson and Trent get to go home tomorrow as well, for no other reason than that they get to have some nice rest. And Ibu marches on, the lone red, potentially still at the World Cup. We will be talking to you after those games, England, France, and Morocco, Portugal. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this Anfield Index show. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel so future podcasts find their way to your device automatically. There's nothing quite like fan engagement, and we'd love to know what you think of anything discussed on this show. The best way to get in touch is over on our free Discord community, where both podcasters and listeners debate the hottest LFC topics 24/7. Sign up free now at anfieldindex.com/Discord. You won't regret it. You can also follow us on Twitter at Anfield Index and find us on Facebook by searching for Anfield Index. Oh, and before you go, we'd love it if you could leave us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast app. It only takes a couple of seconds, and it means the world to the people who create these free shows.